Okay, I want you to picture something. Imagine you're crossing this huge, flat sea of marshland, and suddenly, out of the mist, this magnificent stone ship just appears. Well, that's not some fantasy. For hundreds of years, that's exactly how people saw the incredible cathedral city of Ely.
It earned this nickname, the Ship of the Fens, because it was the only thing you could see for miles. For any traveler slogging through that wet, wild landscape, it looked like a great vessel sailing on a sea of reeds, a real beacon of power and faith on an otherwise empty horizon.
And that really is the big question, isn't it? How on earth did one of England's most stunning cathedrals get built in the middle of what was basically an isolated, swampy island full of eels? This story, it's not just about architecture. It's about faith, defiance, and, believe it or not, a whole lot of eels. To really get a lappy, you have to dig into its foundations. And I mean that literally and figuratively. They're built on three things: profound holiness, a really stubborn, rebellious spirit, and the slippery currency that actually paid for the whole thing. The story kicks off way back in 673 with an Anglo-Saxon princess, Saint Etheldreda, who founds a monastery here. Then, disaster strikes. Vikings show up and destroy it. But, like all great comeback stories, it rises from the ashes, refounded as one of the wealthiest abbeys in England. And then it completely transforms into the last holdout for English resistance against William the Conqueror. Right from the very beginning, Ely was a place of extremes. And this dual identity is perfectly captured by two legendary figures. On one hand, you've got Saint Etheldreda, the pious founder, a true symbol of divine faith. And on the other, you have Hereward the Wake, this guerrilla warrior who used the swampy landscape to wage a campaign against the Normans. He's the symbol of fierce, raw independence. You see, saint and rebel, faith and fight. It's all baked into the city's DNA. And the city's name itself tells you just how practical its origins were. Before it was the Isle of Saints, it was the Isle of Eels. The name Ely literally means eel district. Why? Because those slithery creatures were the absolute lifeblood of the local economy. And just how important were they? Well, get this. Forget gold or silver. To get the limestone to build the new cathedral, the monks of Ely paid a yearly rent of 8,000 eels to the quarry owners. No, that's not a legend. It's a real historical transaction. They literally built this massive, magnificent cathedral on a foundation of eels. You can't make this stuff. All right, so now let's turn to the building itself. Because its most famous feature, the thing that makes it truly unique, was never part of the original plan. In fact, it was born from a complete and utter catastrophe that somehow turned into a moment of pure genius. And the result of that genius? Well, it was something so revolutionary, so absolutely breathtaking, that people across Europe hailed it as one of the great wonders of the medieval world. It totally cemented Ely's reputation not just for faith, but for mind-blowing innovation. So here's how it all went down. For 200 years, a massive, pretty standard Norman tower stood right in the center of the cathedral. Then, one night in 1322, the whole thing just came crashing down. Total disaster. But instead of just rebuilding the same old thing, a monk named Alan of Walsingham had this incredible, revolutionary idea. He said, "Don't build a square, let's build an octagon." He replaced all that heavy stone with an unbelievable marvel of timber and glass that just floods the whole cathedral with light. It's genius. And the octagon is just the star of the show. The whole place is an architectural treasure chest. It's got one of the longest naves in the country, the largest lady chapel in the entire UK, and this colossal west tower that you can see from miles away. Seriously, everything about this building is on a monumental scale. But Ely's story doesn't just stop in the Middle Ages, not at all. The city kept finding itself at the center of national and even international conflicts. Later centuries just kept adding new, surprising layers to its history. Now, this is fascinating. Before he was the Lord Protector of England, the guy who would overthrow a king, Oliver Cromwell was just a local guy in Ely. He lived right here for a decade, working as a tax collector for the church. His house is still there today, a pretty humble building right in the shadow of the great cathedral, the quiet home of a man who is about to turn the entire world upside down. And then there's this thing, a massive cannon sitting right outside the cathedral. What's that about? Well, it's a trophy from the Crimean War, captured from the Russians at Sevastopol and gifted to the city by none other than Queen Victoria. What makes it extra special, though, is that it's a rare survivor.
See, most towns melted down their old cannons for scrap metal during World War II, but for some reason, Ely's is still here.
It really creates such a striking image, doesn't it? You have this brutal, heavy instrument of 19th century warfare just sitting there peacefully next to this ancient monument to faith. It's just another one of those strange, layered contradictions that makes Ely so incredibly compelling.
So how do all these layers of history actually live on today? Well, in Ely, the past isn't just something you see in a museum. It's really woven into the very fabric of daily life in ways both big and small. So if you ever walk through Ely, you might wonder why there are two massive churches right next to each other. It really comes down to a classic medieval social divide. Think of it like an upstairs-downstairs for worship. The Grand Cathedral, that was for the monks, a private space for their quiet contemplation. But right next door, the smaller St. Mary's Church was for the ordinary townspeople and all their noisy, everyday lives. Baptisms, weddings, funerals. Oliver Cromwell's family, for instance, they would have been at St. Mary's.
And here's a story that just brings everything full circle. During the Reformation, St. Etheldrada's shrine was completely destroyed, but a relic of her hand was saved, and it was hidden away by a Catholic family for centuries. Then, in 1953, it was finally returned to a church in Ely, a real physical link connecting the modern city all the way back to its 7th century founder. Just amazing.
And of course, all that grandeur hasn't gone unnoticed by Hollywood. The cathedral's stunning interiors have stood in for Westminster Abbey in huge shows like The Crown and movies like The King's Speech. So yeah, if it looks a little familiar, it's probably because you've seen it playing a starring role on your screen.
When you step back and look at the whole picture, Ely is so much more than just a beautiful building. It's really a testament to the idea that truly great things can come from the most unlikely of places. A muddy island in a swamp became a center of sanctity, a stronghold of rebellion, and the birthplace of an absolute engineering masterpiece.
Ely's story is one of a kind, for sure, but it does leave us with a final thought. This whole act of digging into the past, of uncovering the hidden layers of saints and rebels and everyday people, that's something we can all do. And it kind of makes you wonder, doesn't it? What forgotten histories, what incredible stories are just waiting to be discovered right outside your own front door?